3 podcast. Spider Brando here today to go into my Venom The Last Dance spoiler review. So I posted my non-spoiler review as like a short form 60-second video. This will be my longer form where I can kind of let loose into the movie. So sticking with my other score of 6.75 out of 10, I am sticking with that as this movie was a 6.75 out of 10 and the best in the Venom trilogy in my opinion. I think this movie was a decent way to cap off the trilogy given what Sony had to work with or what Sony was working with, and it did pay off a lot of elements from Venom 1, kind of how going into the spoiler territory now, into how they chose that the symbiotes were just running from a threat, and obviously we know and learn more throughout Venom 3 that threat was Knull, and they were running from him and scared because they locked him inside. Now the movie does open up with Knull's kind of backstory, which I was not expecting it to open up that way, but I'm happy it did because it kind of set the course of what to expect throughout the movie. And Knull was going into this movie was our biggest red flag. Like, why introduce them in the final movie of the trilogy and say all this stuff like Kelly Merced, the director, has recently said that this is not the end of Knull, but by the time you get to the end of Venom The Last Dance, it makes you feel like it's the end of Knull, because like, where is he going to tie into next? Kraven? No. There's no other Sony Spider-Man movies post-Kraven that's, I think, like, established, besides maybe El Muerto, if that's still a thing. And then Spider-Man 4. But it just doesn't feel like, it just doesn't make sense how they describe it and what happens in this movie to have Knull fit in Spider-Man 4, like we've been saying for months on the Point 3 and our most recent videos. Spoiler from it, but the movie opens up with the Knull scene, like I mentioned, kind of him telling the Xenomorphs to go find me the Codex, and the Codex occurs. I'm not the best, also as a preface, I'm not the best with Knull lore or knowledge. I have never read King in Black or many of his runs, so what I do know is mostly from Hero and Lou, our co-hosts. But from what they've described to me, it's a pretty good adaptation of the Knull kind of backstory or lore that they did, and it's just interesting though, because they describe that Venom and Eddie are the Codex that he's needed to break out of Quintar. And the Codex forms when a symbiote saves its host's life, essentially. So when Eddie died in Venom 1 or 2, Venom happened to save his life to cause him to be alive again. So that created the fusing between their life forms and the Codex to unlock Knull's chamber, whatever, his room, throne, I don't know, whatever that's called, to unlock him out of his prison. And xenophages, not xenomorphs, whoops, that's alien. The xenophages are able to track down Venom when he's in full Venom mode, but not when he's just like hiding inside him. It's like a little signal thing that pops out for him. So that leads me into what I'm getting into. The movie opened up with that and then went into the No Way Home post-credit scene, but it retconned the No Way Home post-credit scene, I think. It started off with them in the post-credit scene, but then they cut out a lot of the dialogue and the references for them wanting to go to New York because of Spider-Man. And then instead of Tom Hardy Venom, just like disappearing like we saw in the post-credit scene, you get to see him go through like a Knull-style portal to bring him back home, say, oh, I'm done with the multiverse shit. And then you see him with the symbiote that gets left in that bar in the Venomverse, not the MCU. We never saw in this movie the MCU symbiote get left in there. So that's just like, is the MCU symbiote still a thing? I don't know now. It's like the Sony planning, terrible aspect of it. And that's why I just don't understand why Knull got debuted so freaking late in this. Now that begs to the question, what's next for Knull? If they retconned the symbiote from being in that post-credit scene or being in the MCU, even though we're supposed to get a MCU symbiote thing. It just doesn't make sense. Why would they cut out all those references in this movie? I guess to not have to make like people be like, oh, I had to watch No Way Home before this. They could have done that, but then why? They still should have left the symbiote being in that original universe to not have fans like me and us crazy fans into all this lore and looking into all details going batshit crazy right now. Because I'm just confused. That part hurts my brain. But when you think of it as a pure Venom, The Last Dance, and like Venom centric story, it's a good end to the trilogy. The acting on Tom Hardy was pretty good in this. There's no 10-year-old Peter Parker rumors, I will say that. Thank God that did not happen in this movie whatsoever. But I think they did lean a little too hard into the marketing of Knull in this movie, which every Sony Spider-Man West movie always leans into too hard of their marketing of stuff that doesn't actually happen a lot throughout the movie. Cough, cough, Madam Web, cough, cough, Morbius, cough, cough, every Venom 1 and 2. Always market all these Spider-Man references, all these random references, and then they boom, cut from this movie. Movie kind of suffers from it. Most of the trailer is the core of what we see throughout this movie, but then they're like, oh, here's like these X details that gets thrown into the plot. There's like 3 different plot lines that go in throughout this movie. They all do interject with one another at one point, which is kind of cool, but also way too convenienced. Like, the Riss Ifron character and his family are just a bunch of hippies that want to go find Area 51 because Area 51 is getting decommissioned. And one thing that pissed me off about that movie too is the way they handled the decommissioning of Area 51. This is a US government military base, like the strongest in the nation, and this family of 4 was able to just wally up in there, open a gate, and then boom, it was getting decommissioned in like 3 days. But you would think the top level site of the nation's like militaristic alien thing would be much more safeguarded in its final closing days, but that shit was not safeguarded whatsoever, and that really genuinely pissed me off just from a IRL looking standpoint. But it had a good amount of conveniences like that to excel it. Like him, you see the Venom point, you see the scene of him going on an airplane to get out of Mexico in the trailers. That happens in the movie, but it's just like, how does he even be able to get onto the plane like that? How does no one get by to seeing some random dude somehow able to latch onto a plane? I don't know. That part just doesn't make sense. And then they show the xenophage that they fight while on the plane, like you see on the trailers, just dies in the engine. No one questions it whatsoever. No one questions it. There's just like, no one looks out the window and starts screaming or like cares about like this plane ever again in that movie. And last point of plot convenience, Miss Chen just randomly being in Vegas at the same time as they get to Vegas. It's just like, I don't know. There's just too much plot conveniences in a row, and I get for like the buddy cop style road along movie that they're going for with it, but it's just like too much of it, and it led to a less substantial movie. But that's what you get with the Sony Spider-Man West movies, even though there's Sony Spider-Man universe movies, even though there's no Spider-Man in it. But overall, from a whole trilogy perspective, I think it was a solid trilogy for given the cards they were able to handle. And now there is room for the future for more. The movie ends with Venom giving his sacrifice to save Eddie and the universe and kind of taking in all of the xenophages that were left to kind of do like a little sacrifice thing to blow them all up. And that leaves us with like, oh, part of the codex is dead. But then we still don't know the status of the MCU symbiote that could still be containing the codex, and that could potentially tie into Spider-Man 4. But this movie also established Nolan as kind of being like this universe centric. They never really established him as being like a multiversal threat. So how will then the xenophages be able to track down that symbiote from a whole different universe? So there's a whole lot of question marks when it comes to Spider-Man 4 now. And I think Sony just really used this and there just to build the hype and kind of throw us all in for a loose end. Because then it even comes down to, how does Doom and Knull shouldn't interact with each other? And if Knull was in Spider-Man 4, Spider-Man 4 comes out 2 months after Doomsday, just doesn't make sense. It hurts my brain to think about, and it hurts my brain to talk about and theorize just going through this right now. Venom: The Last Dance was a movie. It was interesting, but it was enjoyable in my opinion. There was parts when I was at the end, I was getting pretty emotional. The final send-off and final moments between Eddie and Venom were pretty sad, I can't lie. They did a nice tribute at the ending of the movie to kind of pay off a couple lines throughout the movie, and had a lot of nice music in the background as the movie was ending. Post-credit scene 1 was good. It was Knull, pretty much confirming that he'll be back somewhere, somehow, some way. I don't know. Like I said, it hurts my brain to think about. Post-credit scene 2 was even weirder. It was the dude from the bar that got captured coming out of the Area 51 base after everything was blown up, and him being like, what the hell happened? And it glimpses down to a final symbiote test suit that has some sparkling coming out of there. So I don't know what that means, because there's no more Venom movies, no more really Sony trilogies, and we clearly know that this movie takes place in the Sonyverse and not the MCU by Statue of Liberty that they show in this movie, and him obviously going back out of the MCU. So whole lot of question marks when it comes to this movie, but ultimately it was a 6.75 out of 10. I'm sticking with that. I would rate Venom 1 as a 6. I would rate Venom 2 as a 4.5 out of 10. So it aligns with the rating of this one being the best in the trilogy. My final closing statement: wait to watch this movie. No, well, I can't say wait. I guess if you're watching this video, you've probably seen the movie because this is a spoiler review. But let me know your thoughts of the movie. I guess I'm just gonna end it with that because I yapped away at my thoughts, and gripes and kind of what I wanted to talk about. Let me know your comments or your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you would, where do you think we could see Knull next? And where do you think we could see Eddie next? Even though we know that Tom Hardy is done with the movie, even though some theories say that some ways he's been talking about the character post-movie coming out may seem like he's not done with the character. So if you like this review, give us a subscribe and a like on the video, and have a great day. Peace.